Hey, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 6, where today Adam and I are joined by longtime friend of Adam's and wonderful leader, Mario Rangel. He is the Executive Director of Intercultural and Global Office at Indiana Wesleyan University. Love the conversation today. So excited to have you join us. Stay tuned.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation and student retention and education. And now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com. And I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world. Here we are. What episode is this?
I was just wondering the same thing. Okay, so we're in Season 2, Episode 6.
Episode 6.
For reference.
Man, we've had some good guests. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Appreciate the help. Somebody's got to keep track of this. You know,
I know,
we
it's not
just
going to
show
be
up
us.
and talk. We've had some good guests this year.
Yeah, year. Oh, yeah, because it's been the new year.
Both.
But also the timing of that.
Yeah, this season's been really good. I mean, we had some really cool conversations, too. And I think we're in for another one. But it's been good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I can't believe it's already. I mean, we're recording this. It's February 27th already.
Right.
Already.
Do you make New Year's resolutions, or did you was there anything you were planning to start at the new year?
No. I'm not a resolution guy.
I'm not either.
I've made some changes.
Guy,
well, you're not a guy.
not
a
a
guy.
resolution
You also have
person.
to realize too, anything that is like what you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
Adam does the opposite.
He's 100%. Yes. I've known him just long enough to pick up on that.
Yes.
So.
Feel like, wait a second.
We're supposed to
Society
have
does resolutions. Screw that.
Yeah,
I'm out.
not doing it.
Yeah, no, I'm not a resolutions guy, although I have made some changes. But the way I get around it is I make those changes about 4 days before the new year. And then when people ask, you do resolution?
Yeah.
No.
I've been doing that.
Yeah, I've been doing that.
Yeah,
I've been doing it
it.
since
4 days.
2024. You're right, 4 days. Yeah,
Right,
no,
right.
so made some changes. But so not a resolution guy. But what about you? Are you?
I am not. I don't do that because resolutions just get broken. But I do try to set maybe a word of the year, or I do have goals and kind of things I would like to achieve through the year. But I don't feel any pressure. It's kind of a good chance to reflect and kind of reframe. Maybe okay, how did last year go? How do I want this year to be different? So what kinds of things do I need to do? But I don't necessarily feel a pressure to,
What's
start.
the word? What's 2025's word?
I had a hard time settling on just one word.
Sound like me now.
I know. So I don't know that I really have one for this year, but yeah, I do have a journal. I've been keeping track of all the ideas and things that I've been wanting to do. So I'm doing a better job at that. So I guess
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Mario Rangel's with us this morning.
I know.
Here I
Super
am.
excited. Hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yep,
I just
yep.
met you 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. Yep.
Obviously, Mario's already joined the conversation.
Yes.
But where are you at in this? You a resolution guy?
Man, I don't know if you remember this, but we were in college together and we had a professor that talked about I think it was the 5 F's or the 7 F's or something like that, but it was family, fun, finance, all these different big areas in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I've taken that, and then shout out to my mentor, Scott Ernie, who had been talking to me a lot about doing good process over looking for an outcome.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, let me just, instead of saying I need to have X amount saved, let me have good process with my finances. And so I've kind of always reviewed that at the end of the year. I'm kind of how did I do, whatever. Yeah. And then having ranges, because I feel I get super mad at myself if I don't hit a goal.
Yeah.
I'm I'm a failure. I'm a total failure, right? And it's not that you're a failure if you give yourself ranges. Yeah. So kind of like the gym for me is
That's
like
really smart.
I like it.
I like that.
So the gym for me, like getting up in the morning going to the gym is like 3 to 5. But I try to keep in mind that 3 is just as good as 4 and 4 is just as good as 5.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives me this variance, but at the end of the year you got that 1% growth. So it works for me.
Oh man, Erika loves the 1% growth.
I do.
You do?
I do. Yeah.
I love it.
James Clear.
I love
Yeah.
it. I love
yes,
it. I love it.
Hey, no more fist bumps.
Yes, we brought it back.
You know, we started this last summer, and Erika and I first 3 episodes, maybe 4, because we recorded I think 4 in the same day.
We did.
First 4 episodes,
and we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah,
What do you do with your hands?
all a little stiff. And how do you end these things?
Yeah.
And it was like, cheers, and there was a fist bump like that. And one of the first bits of feedback we got about the podcast is stop the fist bump.
Stop the fist bump.
So
It will make somebody mad. Here we go. One more time. We'll make somebody mad.
Look, we brought it back. There it is. It's a retro. It's a throwback. It's a throwback episode.
I love it.
Yeah, one of the first things we had to change, but that was fun. Thanks for bringing that in.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really cool principle. I think that makes it easier.
like that.
And I
Not
think,
mine. I
Give
just
yourself some grace, to have a range. I really like that.
I needed that in my life. We kind of talked about like coming down here before. It's like I have a tendency to walk tight ropes. Like it's either this or that. Like I have to hit it. And if that's the case, if I mess up at any time during that process, then I fall to my death. It's like it's the worst. But instead, like I've been kind of taught, like seeing it as a sidewalk. You know, you've got this range that you can kind of go through life. Gives you a little bit of, you know.
That makes a lot of sense because things happen and you kind of need that leeway sometimes.
It's life. That's so much life, right?
Yeah, when you think of that tightrope like a guitar string, right?
That's what you're talking about, yep.
And life strums it. Yeah, your ability to stay balanced on that becomes much more difficult. And I think sometimes we can get in a way to where that's the plan, right? I've got a plan, especially as a leader. Here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. And then you realize that 75% of leading is actual social interaction and dealing with social challenges. And you realize your plan is a mess. So, it's interesting. Where do you think, you talk about that tightrope?
Yeah, tightrope.
Tightrope.
There you go.
I got it. I'll get here this morning. Where do you think that came from for you? Tell us about you.
Please.
Yeah, so I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with the Enneagram, right? So for those that aren't, it's a personality assessment that's faith-based. I really like this assessment too because it talks about where you go to when you're stressed and where you go to when you're like I guess healthier. And for me, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, which is a really like hardcore, like type A. I love bullet points. I love check boxes, that sort of thing. And so that kind of feeds into the tightrope feeling. Yeah. But then you put it in conjunction with that. I was in the military, so I spent time in the military. My dad was in the military. And I was raised in a martial arts academy. So I own a martial arts academy now, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, all those sort of things. But so it was very like militaristic. And it was nice because it put things in categories. It's like, I do this, I get results. I don't do this, that's not right. But the problem is like life doesn't work that way. You know, especially like in relationships. You talk about leadership. I mean, leadership is really difficult. If you're the type of leader that's like, this is my opinion, but if you're the type of leader that's like, these are the expectations, hit it. And then those aren't hit, and that kind of determines whether you're a good employee or a bad employee. And in my opinion, I think that's setting people up for failure rather than saying, listen, there's a sidewalk and let's do good process. Going back to that again, let's do good process. And whether you hit that goal exactly, and it needs to be something needs to be produced, right? But if you see that there's an initiative there, right, that I think that's where you can celebrate that. So again, I think it's just my background, the way I was raised, the things I've been through, the struggle in my life, like, you know, loss, like Adam was kind of alluding to earlier. I think it's all taught me to really kind of seek results, but that's also kind of led me to be in my earlier part of my career, too independent. Too independent.
Another thing I like about that sidewalk analogy is it's a clear expectation, having a range, for example, in terms of here's the outcome that we expect to see in this range. So that's clear and defined. And whether or not you fall to the left or the right of that tightrope is still progress.
You're moving.
You're still moving. It's only a foot away. The sidewalks aren't that wide.
Yeah.
So it's still.
and let me ask you something. Doesn't that feel better to think about life like that?
It does. And it doesn't, the alternative to that feels so much like burnout and like you said, win or lose. And I'm sure you've struggled through that and have felt that before. And
oh man, I think part of the issue we have on ourselves too, especially personalities like myself, is that I'll give this analogy real quick. I teach martial arts. My daughter actually fought at nationals, right, in Taekwondo. We had a great time, but I noticed that there's some coaches that will yell at their player. They come back and they sit on the stool and they're like, you need to do that. I mean, down to where they're cursing all this other stuff. And I'm like, looking at them, I'm like, I just don't think it's that effective, right? And then with my daughter, I've kind of learned her personality. I'm like, look, I call her Nanita, right? Little Nana, right? I say, hey, Nanita, sit down. Here's a drink of water. Let's breathe. Enjoy the moment. Yeah. Where you at, right? Now, what do you think we're doing wrong? Oh, well, you know what? I don't know. I just feel like I can't connect this kick. I said, how about when she comes in, let's jump off to the right. And I said, and let's go for a headshot in that moment because I see that your hands are kind of low. And she's like, okay. And I think what's happened there is you are coached.
Yeah.
You're not criticized.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, I noticed that I criticize myself a lot. And so I'm thinking, if I'm doing that, I'm probably going to project that onto my employees. I'm probably going to project that onto my family, my wife, everybody, right? So what I had to do is sit back and look and go, wait a minute, maybe it's not necessarily me being critical. Maybe I need to coach myself. So that looks different. It's like, hey, let's sit back, enjoy life for a minute.
Yeah.
Let your shoulders down, right? And now what I'd like for you to do is I'd like for you to work on how you communicate. I can do that. How? Well, in this particular situation. And I think what that's done is allowed me to coach myself. And then you project that.
Yeah.
And then that goes back to that sidewalk analogy.
Absolutely. And how do you, particularly as a leader, being with the personality that you have and so goal-oriented and having, so hard on yourself, there are personality types that are opposite of that. How do you make that work?
Yeah. Boy, that's a tricky one. We're going to jump right in.
How do you work with someone that's overly chill, bro? Yeah. That's what she's asking. Let me just say it plain.
That's right.
I think a big part, and we're talking about leadership, right?
Yeah.
I think a big part, and this is based off experience. This isn't researched or anything like that, but I think a big part is recognizing and valuing that person, right? I think that's huge because people will, I heard this the other day, people will go where they feel welcome. Right. It's like I come into this podcast. It's the first time coming in here. It's like I feel pretty welcome. But the way you guys are looking at me, the way you guys had communicated with me, Chris over there just even shaking hands on me, I felt valued. And I think that value keeps a person. Right. So looking at a person and saying, okay, I value you for the strengths that you bring in. How can I use those in that work setting? You may not be the person that's like go, but you're my relational person.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm, and I've got a guy that works for me now. He is such a good teacher. And so I said, buddy, I want you to do a workshop for me. I walked by and I just saw him and he was so animated. And I was like, this dude came alive. It was like that, I call it the cold chill moment. When you do something, you're like, whoop, I got cold chills. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yes.
And so, I told him, I said, I would really like to put you in charge of all of our workshops. What do you think about that? Take that.
Oh, man.
And it was like, I'm valuing him.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that you operate different than I do. This is where your specialty is. Now let's go. And you give him autonomy with it.
Yeah. Did he just light up when you
and sidewalk approach. Shout out to Scott Ernie, right?
Yeah.
Sidewalk approach.
Right.
You're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some.
So you said people go where they feel welcome, but they stay where they feel valued. What, in your experience, right? Whether it's past, present, whatever you want to share, what is it that makes a person feel valued? What have you observed?
Yeah. I think it's going to be different for everybody, but I will say you can't forget the basics, in my opinion. And so my life motto is you don't worry about being extraordinary. Do the ordinary extra, right? Do the ordinary extra. And I think sometimes that's as simple as, first they got to be seen, right? You got to see that person. And not just walk in, hey, how you doing? But like really see that person for their value. What do they bring to the team? And then listen. And a lot of times what they're saying with words is not what they really are saying, if you know what I mean. So I think just listening for that is super duper important. And then giving them a piece of, like, one of my favorite guys to watch is Simon Sinek. I think he says it best when you're there to serve them. And I was talking to Adam about this earlier. I felt like my wife is one of the best leaders. Like she leads our academy, like as far as like the administrative side of it. But the reason why is because she gets right along somebody and serves right along with. She's the last one to sit down at dinner. You know, she's the first one to jump up and say, hey, and to invite. I think that's some of the ways you can value people.
Yeah, right.
And you've mentioned a couple of times already your role at work and how you lead. What is it that you do?
So I'm the executive director for the Intercultural and Global Office.
Okay.
Right? So that's my title. What I do, what I really love is that we've become like a refuge and a resource center for diverse students. And this could be international students, brown and black students, students that have, this is probably one of the most interesting ones though, is we have a white group of students that like kick it in there. So we got a lounge. There's like 12 programs that I oversee.
Nice.
But what I really like is they come in there like, I grew up different. Like I feel more comfortable in this environment. I'm like, come on in, right? So that's what I do. We're a refuge. We're a resource center. We give access and support students. And
that's at Indiana Wesleyan University, the traditional campus in North Central Indiana.
That's right.
So how'd you get there?
Oh man,
I mean, you didn't go. I know you didn't go to school for this. So how did you get there?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is I grew up. My father's side is from Texas and Mexico. My mother's side is from Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I always like to say I didn't realize that my mother was white until I was probably about 12 or 13 years old because my mom could speak Spanish. She would she adopted the Mexican culture. And the reason why is because she met my dad working in the fields, the tomato fields, right?
Really?
Yeah. That's how they kind of first originally met. And then they met again at a restaurant where they were working as teenagers. Well, they got married. My dad goes off to Vietnam era. And my mom moved in with his parents, and they didn't speak English. So my mom was kind of forced to go, hey, I need to learn how to speak Spanish, all this sort of thing. And so that kind of had me in this world where I'm like, man, where do I belong? Like, I'm half Mexican, right? I don't feel white, but I don't feel Mexican. I'm like this brown guy that doesn't have a category, right? And then I was also raised like bi-religious. My dad, he didn't go to church. Mom was like certainly in church, right? And so I had all these things. And then when I joined the military, I get out and I meet other Hispanic people. And I'm like, they're like, why do you talk so country? Like, why do you? And I'm like, so I always kind of felt like, where do I belong? You know, and you got to also, in like with the Hispanic community, you have to really kind of pass the Spanish test. It's like, hey, you speak Spanish? I'm like, yeah. You know,
like, how Spanish are you?
Yeah.
How Spanish are you?
It's not fair either because if white people can speak Spanish, they're like, yay, come on in, right? But if you are brown and you can't speak Spanish, then that's like the test, right? I'm also trying to fight against that because the way I use that language is, did you get the opportunity to learn Spanish, right? Because not everybody has that opportunity.
Right.
So that kind of led me into this heart for people that are kind of on the marginalized area. Like, you know what I mean? It gave me a heart for that. And when I realized is my life mission, I've been dealing and working and supporting folks on the marginalized community in just every job I went to. And now this position opened up, and I'm like, I get a chance to do what I've been living
your purpose.
all my life.
Yeah, it's who you are to the core. And what was your path to get there? I mean, like Adam said, it's not like you went to school. And
Yeah, so my quick path,
studied
I'll give you, I
this.
graduated Marion High School. Didn't know what I was going to do. Nobody had really talked to me about like education. I had no idea. I thought you had to be a doctor or a lawyer to go to college. And then I find out there's all kinds of social work, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
So I joined the military, went in as an electrician. I served 4 years. I get out. I come back and I start working at Weaver Popcorn for a little while. I was driving semi-truck, unloading corn, shoveling corn 12 hours a day, trying to make my way. And then I ended up going to Chrysler. I got on at Chrysler in Kokomo, and I worked there for almost 10 years. And then this guy comes at me and is like, we were in church together at the time. I got into church, and he was like, man, there's a job opening up at Indiana Wesleyan in the landscaping department. I wanted to do it so bad, but I'm like, man, I can't. The pay jump, it's going to be hard.
It was huge.
Huge, but I decided, I trusted God, and I think some people misuse that too. I think you got to trust God and also plan. Like what's the plan? You know what I mean? And so I feel like we went through that with, and prayed, and all of a sudden it was like a month later they came out and Chrysler was offering a buyout. Oh. And I'm like, you're kidding me. So I took the buyout, and I had smart people around me. He's like, hey, invest that. Don't just blow it. Started working for Adam at Indiana Wesleyan in landscaping. So planted trees, dug holes, built wall, all this other stuff, right? And because of my military experience, we had like the emergency preparedness portion to my role. A guy named Michael Moffitt, shout out to Michael Moffitt, gave me access. He was a vice president at the time of student development. And a job came open for, it was then a coordinator of campus police, and then later on it turned into the chief of police, director of emergency management. He come to me and says, man, I think you should apply for this job. And I'm like, man, what was going on during that time was like Virginia Tech shootings, Columbine, all these things that just happened. So there was this big emphasis on like active shooter training, all this other stuff. Yeah. And since I had emergency preparedness training in the military, it gave me access to get into the job. So I did that for, I think, 7 years, and then I went in and I was an advisor for students in a Center for Student Success for about 7 years. Great resting period for me. It also taught me so much about counseling, all those types of things. And then this position opened up during that process. So, yeah.
Isn't it interesting how you talk about just the things that were going on culturally and in the country at the time? Yeah. With this opportunity that opened up, and just the access plus your experiences and just that opportunity. And I mean, those were like in perfect alignment. Yeah.
It's interesting how you can see something as an opportunity, or you can see it as, a hindrance, I guess.
Well, I think there's so much an element too of this, and having been riding shotgun for most of your journey, there's an element of this that says, why not? Yeah. Right? Because how do you go from Weaver Popcorn to the executive director of Intercultural and Global at a university? Yeah. And the only way to do that is to look at the next thing and say, why not me? And then take the step. And not always, I think, when we have those encounters across our life, not always are we looking at a thing that looks like a step up, right? I mean, the pinnacle in our community, not your ethnicity or your people group, right? Not just the Mexican culture in our community, but our community in general would have said, you made it to Chrysler. You good, right? You're set. You're going to have your life. Good job. But there was something in you that wanted different, wanted more, right? And there's a response, I think, in that within us that I think so many of us ignore, right? That we need to address in the mirror that question. What are you trying to say to me, right? To yourself, that there's more. There's something missing in my life. And for you come to discover its purpose. But purpose shows up in the opportunity of a 60% pay cut to go back to what is stereotypically a Hispanic job. Yeah. Right. How did you took a step to say, I'm going to leave the pinnacle of our community and ultimately take a step backwards in the eyes of everyone around me but you did it because of your purpose. And at the time, it was your family, right?
Yep.
That was the motivator. That was the prompting. And then to be, roll that story out 15 years later and now having a graduate degree and leading at a high level. I mean, what an incredible journey. But I think we want it to be handed to us today, and we don't realize that it takes a step to say, why not me? And not just because it's better, but because it's different. It's maybe a step to where you're going. Did
fear ever come into play, taking those steps?
Oh yeah, I think it's what's crazy is I feel like I live by fear. Like fear has been a motivator of mine. Fear and anger. Okay, just to be vulnerable. A lot of what I felt as a kid, even as a young adult, was fear and anger. But what I was talking to Adam about this, and I teach my class this kind of acronym, RUMU, but it's recognize, understand, manage, and use your emotions. Right? It's emotional intelligence. You. Yeah, I know it sounds like O at the end, but right, I had to do something to make it work. But I think that what I realize is when you dig down a little deeper, it's like it was maybe a scarcity mentality. That was kind of pushing me these areas. Like there's an opportunity. I got to go after it. Even though I'm scared to death, I've got to go after it. And I think it was Teddy Roosevelt. I think he said this, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but he's like, opportunity is missed by a lot because it's dressed in overalls and looks like hard work.
Oh yeah.
And I want to take that, if I can for a second, I want to take that a step further though, because in a lot of the cultures that I've been privileged to be in, the Hispanic culture, Black culture, it's often said like, come on, work harder. But I feel like there needs to not only be the work harder, but the understanding how to work harder to be efficient and effective. Because you can just show up and go to work every day.
Yeah.
And nothing's going to happen because you don't have the understanding, the know-how. So I think work blended with a good mix of like mentorship, discipleship, having somebody be your sponsor. I heard there's a book out there. I want to get it, but it's like, I don't need a mentor. I need a sponsor or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like you need somebody that's in your corner that says, I see you, and now I'm going to give you an opportunity. And I think the best way for us to give back is to identify people that are in similar situations like that. Like you said, I see you, man.
Yeah.
I see you, lady. I see you over there. Let me give you an opportunity. And the opportunity, that's really like my life mission too, is just recognizing in people, inspiring people, challenging people to be the best version of themselves. And then you break that down, like how you do that, right? But I feel like that's super important to give back. So yes, to answer your question, fear, anger, all those things were part of my motivators. And the thing is that they're effective.
For sure.
They're super effective, but they have a shelf life.
In all kinds of ways.
They have a shelf life.
I just said this to my daughter, Amelia, because she was talking about some experience she's had at work, and like they just drive by fear. Yeah. And she's like, I just can't see it. It doesn't work. I'm like, whoa. No, it works.
It's effective.
That's why people do it, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not.
It burns people out. And so we got a little under 10 minutes here. I really want to get to kind of hear your thoughts about if you're looking at someone who's stepping into leadership, maybe it's their first role leading, right? Versus maybe you've been in a management position, right? You managing process and you got a couple people that kind of report to you. That's a little bit different than a leadership role where now you're responsible more for some vision, some innovation, right? Those kinds of things. You've made that step. I, again, happen to be riding shotgun for that step, your first step into actually leading a group that was working together, not your first step leading. You had been leading because that's who you are. But when you think about that, we try to bring some practical stuff at the end of this. Like, what can I do today? You said, don't try to be extraordinary. Just do the ordinary extra. That's practical. But if you're looking at someone in that, taking that step and saying, you're going to lead people, what is the most practical yet sustainable direction advice that you could give somebody, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that come to mind, right? I mean, it's a
big question.
10 minutes. I think the very first thing I would say is have that person identify, do you know what leadership really is? Mm. Do you really know what it is? Because I take the example of like the barber. There's if you have the technical skill of cutting hair, right, and you're good at barbering, then somebody says, well, you're so good, you should own your own business and lead people. It's like, yeah, you may be a good technician, maybe a good barber, but leading somebody, that's a whole nother job description.
Sure.
And people don't see it that way. They just see it, I've done so well, I'm just going to move up. And what happens with that is that person that moves up, they have a tendency now to go back and micromanage the thing that they knew how to do really well. Because they feel insufficient here. They feel kind of,
the value is in producing the thing they were good at.
And so they don't have the same confidence. They don't have the same, the dopamine's not dropping, like I got to win.
Right.
And so they're going back and going, well, I need to control that then. I need to go back to what I do know. So I think that's the first thing. Like, do you know what leadership is? And I would say probably the number one thing is to work on like people skills. Sure. Socials. If you do not have that, to me, that's the entry. Like, you're not going to lead. That's the pinnacle of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that resonates with the message through season 1 and so far season 2. We had said in one of the episodes this season that if we were to simplify the responsibility of leadership, it is to answer the question that your team is asking. Do I matter? And does what I'm doing matter? That requires a more of a personal observation, not a technical skill.
Right.
Right. You have to understand humans and to be
high
able to help
emotional
them
intelligence.
answer. Right. Right.
And practice. I like this analogy. Like, I'll talk to some of my guys in my class and I'll say, if I had an apple here and I set it down on the table and you've never, ever seen an apple, well, you get the visual of it. You get to see it. But then I walk up and I put it in your hand. Right. And now you're like, wow, that's cool. It's slick. I notice the color. But you haven't had an apple yet until you what?
Yeah.
Taste
Take
it.
a bite.
Once you've done that, then the experience, I think that's also something like when you start off leading, realize you're going to have you can read all the books. I mean, we both have master's degrees in leadership. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Great. But until you get in there and put it to practice, it's like martial arts. I can teach you how to fight.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you can be the gym all-star, the drill dude.
Yep.
I can look good on a bag, but as soon as somebody hits me, it's like crumble.
Yeah.
So I think also knowing that, like, listen, there's theory, there's all these things, and then putting them into practice is super important. And I think also another key would be like somebody who's strategic and can cast vision. It's like you got to know where you're going. You know what I mean? I think that's important.
Yeah.
As you work with young leaders in particular, I mean, that is a big change, being more strategic and more visionary versus being a technician and doing this one thing, something really, really well. Is there a way, based on your experience, how you've been able to like draw that out of people, or like, is it teachable?
For like leadership, like
kind of.
Can you say it another way, maybe?
Yeah, maybe those more soft skills related to leadership. Where helping somebody to be, more visionary, set that vision for their team and encourage that. Maybe they haven't ever done that before. And
I think the tool that I probably use the most is just self-reflecting. Like I don't know if that quite answers your question, but I feel like it's a huge part of that development, that growth is like so many people don't know how to self-reflect.
Yeah.
And they don't know who to go to for that, because you can get hurt and you can go to the wrong person and you'd be like, hey, tell me what I'm doing wrong. And they're using that opportunity to really be like, I'm going to get this guy back. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, that's not what I want.
Right. So
you've got to have somebody that you trust, somebody that has the best interest in your mind, somebody that doesn't think you're too cool for school either. Because I've went to people before and I'm like, hey, what do you think? And they want me to like them.
Yes. So true.
So they're not honest with me. And I'm like, that's not why I came. And You know, I practice this with my wife, and I don't know if you heard that first word, practice. You have to practice. Practice. It's never ending. There's never any like, oh, I've reached the goal of self-reflection.
Yeah.
I think you need to sit down and say, what am I terrible at? And that's ouch sometimes. And, you know, you got to have that person that can put it in a way that can help you really see it in yourself, because I'm a firm believer that there's a difference between weaknesses and blind spots.
Sure.
I feel like weaknesses is something, you know, it's like, I'm just kind of weak at that. Not the best at XYZ.
Yeah.
But a blind spot, that's something where you're like, I didn't even know it was there. It's like my wife yells over me, Mario! And I'm like, I saw it, you know? And she's like, what? No, you didn't. I did too. And I think that's what happens in self-reflection.
Yeah.
If somebody says, you know, Erika, right? It's like, no, I saw it. It's like, no, you didn't, right? You're lying to me, right? So I think that's and it's also like relational too, in the fact that what that person does with that information when you're vulnerable with them. If somebody comes to me and says, can you tell me a little bit like what I'm doing wrong? Man, I'm so glad that you chose me.
Right.
Like I want to be careful with how I respond to you. Like, you know, and then that becomes a safe place.
Yeah.
A safe experience.
Yeah.
A trusted experience. To where now that person is probably more likely to come back to me, and I can say, hey, let's develop a little bit more. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's key. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, no, and it makes me think of your earlier example with your daughter, you know, just, okay, let's breathe, get present. But you created that safe space with her.
right.
And allowed her through reflection, through that moment, for her to come up with a solution. And, you know, you've got the wisdom and experience to kind of help guide her in that, but she's
That's
coming
it.
up with that, and then she can go apply that, you know. So
I like the word you used there, guide.
guide.
I think that's so good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you circled back to that, because I thought that's where we got to land, because it's such a beautiful example. And I think in that moment, they're quite literally in a fight, right? Yeah, it's a sport, right?
That's good, Adam.
You're quite literally in a fight. And I think as leaders, as we wrap, we'll close on this. As leaders, we look at it and go, well, I was justified in my approach to that person because the deadline. Well, I've been to those tournaments. My son competed. You get a minute.
Yeah.
You got 60 seconds to coach her. That's a deadline. And you still created space, not to get her to breathe. Yes, you did. But to invite her into the solution. And so many times leaders just jump. I just got to tell you what to do because there's a deadline. And you eliminate their ability to enter the solution. And you strip them of their agency. We were talking about this on the way down.
Yeah.
You strip them of their agency. And now I'm less bought in because I'm just executing what you told me to do. I didn't participate in the solution. And what a great place to drop this and land. I thank you for being on.
Yeah,
I
so
know
much fun.
It's so great to meet you.
I know you're doing another episode with me at least, but you are an incredible leader.
Thank
And
you.
when we started outlining guests, you were right out the first of my list, and we didn't start doing guests till the end of season 1. But I want to personally thank you, and I'll let you close.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your military service. Thank you for
Yeah.
your wonderful leadership.
Thanks for your support.
Thank you for being here. It was, great to meet you.
It was great to meet you guys,
Thank
too.
you so much.
To you. I've known you for a while.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for the fist bump.
Yes.
Yes, thanks for bringing back the
Brought it
fist
back.
bump.
I love it. I
Hey,
love it.
good episode. That was
Success.
good.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
absolutely.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.